What is up, you guys? Naesam here, and I've noticed a lot of confusion about at least Shaman Stats. Like, do we have stat weights? Do we have a pawn string? Do we just have a stat priority? All that stuff. So in this video I'm going to kind of explain in detail how our stats actually work to optimize your damage. So hopefully you guys learned something. Let's get started. I want to start off by saying that no, there is not any just default stat weight. It changes every time you get a new piece of gear, which also means there is no pawn string. So if you want a pawn string, you have to make it yourself. And even then, the way at least Shaman Stats work, they're kind of all over the place. They kind of it basically depends on a ratio. You want to keep them at a certain amount comparative to each other. So a pawn string would never really work because a pawn string doesn't account for lost stats. So I would not recommend using pawn. I would recommend just using, or I guess you could just sim each piece and see if it's an upgrade. But going a little too much into detail on this, basically there are stat ratios. So for every one of certain stats, like whatever the best stat is, you want X of the following stats, and these ratios are actually pinned on the Earth Shrine Discord server, which is the in the Elemental Shaman tab, of course. And basically, I'm gonna go over them briefly. For Ice Fury, for every one crit, you want 0.85 Mastery, 0.35 Versatility, and 0.17 Haste. So basically, that means for every let's say you have 10,000 crit. You want 8,500 Mastery, you want 3,500 Versatility, and you want 1,700 Haste. For Ascendance, for every 1 Mastery up until the cap, you want 0.51 Crit, 0.22 Haste, and 0.07 Verse. And for Lightning Rod, you want, for every 1 Mastery, 0.73 Crit, 0.17 Verse, and 0.15 Haste. These are subject to change every time something in the game changes, and sometimes we find a bug in SimCraft or whatever, so you want to come back to Earth Shrine and periodically check that pin to make sure nothing has changed. But I don't think we'll find any changes until probably 7.2 or something when new traits come in. But you definitely want to come back and check then. But that's basically how the stat ratios work. But keep in mind that you don't want to sacrifice a whole lot of a little lag spike there. You don't want to sacrifice a whole lot of eye level to maintain the ratio, because Intellect is very powerful for us. We have such high spell power coefficients after the 715 buffs. But you still want to do your best to get gear that keeps the ratio. As you can see, my gear is pretty bad right now. My stats are actually really bad. I think they're the most attuned for is probably Lightning Rod. And even then, I have way too much haste and versatility for everything. The only thing I have a decent amount of haste and versatility for is, Ice Fury, and then I have way too much Mastery for that, so my secondary stats are kind of bad right now, so don't use my Armory as a point of reference or anything. But yeah, the best way to find things is to sim yourself after every upgrade and see if it's DPS increase. That's the best way to do it. So just to clarify, that is specifically for single target. For AoE for all builds, haste is going to be a lot better than it is in the single target builds, because for one thing, haste has hard breakpoints on Earthquake. It's the only hard breakpoint left in this spec when it comes to extra ticks for things. And haste also is really good for your Chain Lightning, because Chain Lightning's main damage source is the trait. So look at this. Static Overload, 10% chance to cause overload on all the targets. This is not affected by Mastery. So when you see overload damage, it's almost entirely not Mastery. It's entirely this trait for Chain Lightning. And then crit, it's good and all, but haste allows you to cast more Chain Lightnings, having more chance to overload, or more chance of static overload. At least that's my understanding of why haste is so good for AoE, or for Chain Lightning. I could be wrong, but either way, the information is good regardless, because haste is the best stat for AoE. But, so if you're going to an AoE boss, you want to push yourself, right now I have 15.24% haste. The breakpoints, you start out at 6 ticks of Earthquake. The first breakpoint is 16.66% Earth haste for another breakpoint. You get 7 ticks at that point. So if I'm going into a boss where I'm going to be using Earthquake frequently, I might look at changing a ring. I might put on this ring. Boom, 18%. Now I may have slightly less crit or whatever. I may have slightly worse Mastery. Whatever it is that you changed, but you have more haste. You have enough haste to hit that breakpoint, and your Earthquake's going to do significantly more damage. The next breakpoint is at 33.33%, which is a lot harder to reach if you're actually going for proper stats, because that's pretty far away. So I wouldn't recommend completely redoing your gear, because most raid bosses are not going to have enough AoE to be viably switching your gear like that. But if for some reason you already have like 31% or something, then if you're able to without sacrificing very much eye level, then I would probably recommend trying to push for it. But most people this is not going to really apply. I had to switch recording programs to actually show my calculator because Fraps doesn't like doing that for some reason. But I wanted to show you guys the formula for finding out how many ticks or how much haste you need to get an additional tick of Earthquake. I don't know if this works for other spells or anything. This is something that Blood Mallet showed me, and I kind of wanted to share it. So basically, let's say you want to see, like I showed you 7 and 8, 7 being 16.66, 8 being 3.33, or 33.33. Let's see you want to know how much it takes to get 9. So you divide 9, the amount of ticks you want, by the amount of ticks that's default, which is 6. That equals 1.5. Now you subtract 1, you have the amount of haste needed, 50%. So you can do this for any number of ticks. 10 divided by 6 needs 66.66%. It's fairly easy to do, but I don't really think anything over the normal, the first 2 extra ticks is really going to be feasible because 50% haste is kind of out there. So I think that about sums up the stats for Elemental Shaman. I will have a link to the Earth Shrine Discord in the description below. Just go to there, make sure to read the rules and everything, because you might get in trouble, and then go to the hashtag Elemental channel, and go to the pins, and it's like the first, second, or third message, depends if we add any more since then. And look at those for whatever talent you're currently using, and just try to follow that ratio without sacrificing much. Biggest thing that I would recommend for like the sacrificing eye level stuff is if you're doing an eye level sacrifice to get a better set of stats on the piece, make sure to sim it and or just double check that it isn't a DPS decrease to do so. Usually it kind of depends on how much eye level you're sacrificing, how much you need those stats, etc, etc. So it's not something I can really tell you, you have to sim it yourself. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time. Hashtag elemental tab. Fuck. Then go to the hashtag elemental shaman. Fuck!